The first whisper wasn't a sound I heard with my ears, but with the hollow space in my chest. A faint, guttural plea escaping the drying clay. I'd seen my creations shift before, in the trick of the studio's dim light, an optical illusion born of exhaustion and shadow. But this was different. This was a yearning, raw and undeniable. That night, the faint tremor wasn't the old house settling. It was the clay figures themselves, their unseeing eyes fixed on something beyond my comprehension, waking with a terrible hunger. I thought I was giving them life. I didn't know I was giving them my own. You know what it feels like, don't you? To have a void so vast inside you, you'd fill it with anything just to feel something again? For me, after Eleanor, after she left me alone in this echoing house, the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams were my only company. My hands, once held in hers, found solace in the raw earth, shaping silence into form. The silence of this old house, once a comfort, now felt like a suffocating blanket pressing down on my thoughts, amplifying every creak of aged timber. The studio, usually a sanctuary of controlled chaos, the scent of turpentine and damp earth, a familiar balm, began to hum with a low, almost imperceptible current of something else. This new clay, from that forgotten seam deep in the Oakhaven mines, was different. It drank the water faster, responded to my touch with an unsettling eagerness, almost as if it wanted to be shaped. Too eager, perhaps. This isn't just a story about art. It's about creation twisted into something monstrous, about the desperate yearning of things that shouldn't live, and the unbearable cost of truly seeing what you've made. I first noticed the changes subtly, like a dream fading at dawn. A faint, almost imperceptible dampness clinging to the most recently finished pieces, long after they should have dried. A shift in their posture, a subtle leaming that wasn't there when I'd last covered them for the night. You'd dismiss it, wouldn't you? Attributed to fatigue, to the play of shadows from the single sputtering bass light in my vast cold studio. But when you're alone, truly alone, your senses sharpen, don't they? And the silence, that vast, crushing silence that filled my nights after Eleanor was gone, began to feel heavier, punctuated by something that wasn't silence at all. It started as a soft internal hum, a low vibration that seemed to emanate not from the earth, but from the sculptures themselves. Then just beyond the edge of hearing, like the whisper of dry leaves on pavement, a faint sigh. I told myself it was the wind, the old house groaning under the weight of decades. But the sighs grew, gaining a fragile, almost human cadence. A tremor would run through the clay figures, a slight shivering movement as if in a deep, dreamy sleep. You almost feel the pull now, don't you? That subtle shift in the air, the cold certainty that something in the shadows is watching. I found myself lingering in the studio longer, drawn by a morbid curiosity, a need to understand the impossible. Each night, I'd pull the heavy canvas off the figures, my breath catching in my throat, half expecting to find them perfectly still, to dismiss it all as a trick of my grieving mind. But they were never quite still. Their faces, molded with such care, faces of men and women I'd only imagined, began to warp, subtle contortions appearing around the mouths, the eyes. Not physical damage, but an expression of profound, silent agony, a quiet pleading etched into their very substance.
I'd try to smooth it out, my fingers trembling on the cool, slightly damp clay, only to find the same expressions subtly returning hours later, or on a different figure. It was as if their silent suffering was contagious. The mine, I thought, that old neglected shaft I'd stumbled upon, it harbored something ancient, something that bled into the earth, into this very clay. Then came the sounds, unmistakable now. Soft, whimpering groans that rose and fell like a tide of anguish. Not from a single figure, but a chorus, a symphony of suffering that filled the vast, cold space. I walked among them, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, the air thick with their unspoken torment. Each figure a mirror of human form, yet utterly devoid of human warmth. It was in the suffocating silence of one such night, the gaslight casting long, dancing shadows that mimicked their tormented forms, that I approached the oldest figure, the first I'd completed with the Oakhaven clay. Its face, once a serene portrait of contemplation, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated yearning. The whimpers had coalesced, the whispers sharpened, and then from those gaping, unpainted lips of clay, a single raspy word escaped, tearing through the quiet. Soul. The sculpture's empty eyes, devoid of iris or pupil, seemed to move, fixing me with an intelligence that was far too ancient, far too predatory for mere earth and water. The single raspy word, soul, hung in the air, thick with the scent of damp earth and unspeakable dread. I recoiled, stumbling backward into a pile of unused canvases, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. You felt that terror, haven't you? The kind that freezes your blood, that tells you everything you thought you knew about reality is a flimsy curtain, about to be torn apart. For a moment, a sliver of sanity screamed for me to flee, to burn the studio to the ground, to bury the Oakhaven clay forever. But then, an even colder curiosity settled over me. A chilling desire to understand the abyss I'd stumbled into. This was no trick of the light, no grief-induced hallucination. The figures, they were alive, and they were hungry. The following nights bled into a tormented blur. Sleep became a forgotten luxury, replaced by a constant vigil. I moved among my creations, a ghost in my own studio, listening. The whimpers grew more distinct, morphing from guttural pleas into choked, fragmented words. Empty, they'd sigh, a collective, despairing exhalation. Cold. And always that insistent, terrible plea, soul, give us soul. The air itself grew heavy, thick with their longing, pressing down on me, making each breath a conscious effort. I tried covering them with heavier tarpaulins, tried locking the studio door, but the sounds, they simply seeped through, echoing in the cavernous silence of the old house. It felt as if the very walls were absorbing their sorrow, breathing it back into the night. Have you ever felt your own essence slowly being leached away? Like a slow leak from a vessel you didn't know you possessed. I started to feel it then. A profound, unshakable fatigue that no amount of rest could assuage. My hands, once strong and vibrant, began to tremble, and a dull ache settled deep in my bones. I'd told myself it was the lack of sleep, the stress, the lingering sorrow for Eleanor. But the truth, you now realize, was far more insidious. I found myself staring at my reflection in the polished glass of a framed charcoal sketch and noticed the subtle changes, a new gauntness to my cheeks, the faint purplish shadows beneath my eyes deepening, my skin taking on an almost translucent quality, as if my own vibrancy was dimming, being siphoned away. The studio, once my refuge, had become a mausoleum of animated despair. The figures, standing silent and still during the day, felt like a silent, accusing audience. Their blank stares, once benign, now felt judgmental, hungry. I tried to work, to create new forms, to distract myself, but my hands felt heavy, lifeless. The clay itself, once so pliable, now resisted me, feeling coarse and unyielding, almost as if it resented my touch, hoarding its secrets. I swore I could feel a faint pulse within the raw earth as I shaped it, a parasitic thrum against my fingertips. You can feel it too, can't you? That chilling vibration, right at the edge of your senses, telling you that something is not merely wrong, but fundamentally unnatural. One particularly harrowing night, after a chorus of desperate moans had driven me to the brink, I snapped. A wild, desperate anger surged through me, a primal need to silence their endless begging. I grabbed a heavy iron mallet, its cold weight a brief comfort in my trembling hand, and strode towards the largest figure, a half-finished male form that seemed to embody their collective anguish. With a guttural cry, I brought the mallet down, aiming for its shoulder. The clay shattered, a sickening crunch of breaking earth in my own desperate rage. But as the fragment of clay flew, something else happened. A searing, white-hot pain erupted in my own right shoulder, identical to where I'd struck the figure. I cried out, dropping the mallet, clutching my arm. It felt as if my very bones had cracked. Looking down, I saw not a bruise, but a network of thin, dark lines, like spider webs, spreading rapidly beneath my skin, mirroring the deep fissures in the broken clay. They pulsed with a faint greenish light that quickly faded. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, my breath catching in a strangled gasp. It wasn't just physical pain, it was a profound existential shock. The figures, they weren't merely affected by me, they were somehow connected to me. I rushed to the small cracked mirror above a dusty workbench. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't truly me. The eyes were sunken deeper, the skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, almost like a death mask. And then I saw them, faint, branching lines, like drying riverbeds just beneath the surface of my own skin, mirroring the shattered clay, echoing the patterns I'd seen on my creations. My own veins. They were becoming like the clay. My creations weren't just asking for a soul, they were taking mine. And that cold, hollow feeling inside me, that wasn't just grief for Eleanor. It was the accelerating emptiness where my own life force used to be. The horror wasn't around me, it was festering within me. The mirror showed me a stranger, a gaunt, hollowed-out parody of myself, etched with the same spiderweb cracks that marred the shattered clay. It was in that moment of horrifying clarity that I understood. The fear I felt wasn't just of them. It was fear for myself. My creations weren't merely mimicking my suffering, they were consuming it, drawing their ghastly sustenance from my very essence.
My hands, the instruments of my art, had become the conduits of my own slow, agonizing decay. You can feel it too, can't you? That terrible realization that the very thing you sought to control has become your relentless predator. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized me. The studio, once a place of creation, was now a tomb, and I, the living sacrifice. Each creak of the old house, each whisper from the clay figures now seemed to mock me, to cheer on my impending demise.
I stumbled through the night, a phantom among phantoms, driven by a desperate, animalistic urge to sever the connection, to reclaim what was being stolen. My eyes, burning with fever, scanned the studio, searching for anything, any tool, any desperate measure to undo the unspeakable act I had wrought. But what do you destroy when the destruction is already happening within you? I clutched at my chest, a sudden, sharp ache blooming there, a phantom pain mirroring the gaping hole in the clay figure's shoulder. My breath hitched. It was not just my physical self that was being drained. It was my memories, my feelings, fragments of Eleanor, moments we shared, flickering at the edge of my mind like dying embers refusing to fully ignite. The clay, it was taking her too. And that was when the second, far more devastating plot twist struck me with the force of a physical blow. The faint, lingering scent of jasmine and old books, Eleanor's scent, that had always clung faintly to my clothes, to the studio, was gone, replaced by the cold, damp earthiness of the Oakhaven clay. Her laughter, once a vivid echo in my memory, was now muted, distant, like a sound heard through heavy water. And the faces of the sculptures, as I stared, truly saw them, I recognized faint, fleeting resemblances. Not to anyone I knew, not exactly, but to expressions Eleanor once wore. A curve of the lip, a tilt of the chin, a certain wistfulness in their empty gazes. My memories of her, they were not fading. They were being reformed, resculpted. They were the very stuff the clay was taking and giving a grotesque, suffocating imitation of life. The sculptures weren't just asking for a soul, they were asking for my soul, and within it, the living memory of Eleanor, the last precious fragment I held onto. A guttural scream tore from my throat, raw and animalistic. This wasn't just a monster I had created, it was a thief of identity, a parasite that fed on the very essence of what made me, me. I scrambled, desperate, towards the workbench, my hands fumbling for anything, a chisel, a hammer, a shard of broken pottery. My reflection in a dirty window showed a man undone, a ghost already, translucent and brittle. The studio was closing in, the silent, watchful figures now feeling less like lamenting victims and more like gleeful, starved predators. You feel the crushing weight of that truth now, don't you? The horror isn't some external force. It's the slow, meticulous dismantling of your very being, brick by excruciating brick. I picked up a large, crude implement, a sculptor's pick, its tip sharp and heavy. My eyes locked onto the central figure, the one that first whispered soul. Its face, now overtly Eleanor's, contorted in a silent plea, a grotesque mockery of my love. The lines beneath my skin pulsed, an agonizing counterpoint to its grotesque animation. I raised the pick, my arm trembling with a strength I didn't know I still possessed, driven by a primal need to reclaim her, to reclaim myself.
"Give her back," I roared, my voice a ragged whisper. "Give me back." I brought the pick down, not at the figure, but at my own hand, the hand that had shaped the clay, the hand that had fed the monster. A blinding flash of pain, a sickening crunch, and then a profound, terrifying silence. My hand, the instrument of my creation and my undoing, lay broken, useless, twisted at an unnatural angle. The figures in the studio, which had been whimpering, moaning, breathing, went utterly still. The air, heavy moments before, became impossibly light, yet also suffocatingly empty. The faint, ghostly scent of jasmine and old books. For a fleeting moment, I almost smelled it again. Then it was gone. Completely.
I knelt amidst the dust and the shards of clay, my broken hand throbbing with a dull, distant ache. The figures stood silent, motionless, their faces locked in their grotesque, yearning expressions. They weren't moving, weren't whispering. They were just clay. Empty. As empty as I now felt. I left the studio door ajar that morning. The sun, pale and watery, crept to the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the silent figures, the silent house. My hand was broken, my mind a fractured landscape of forgotten memories. I walked out, not looking back. I couldn't. I felt lighter, hollowed out, as if a great weight had been lifted, but also utterly bereft. I still feel the phantom ache in my shoulder sometimes, a dull throb that reminds me of the night I broke the clay. And sometimes, in the deep silence of this empty house, I can almost hear it, a faint, almost imperceptible sigh, like a breath held too long, finally released. Not from the studio, not from the earth, but from somewhere deep within me. The clay is still there, waiting, and the mind, it still breathes. But I am empty. I am merely the vessel that carried the hunger. What about you? Can you still feel your own soul whole and unbroken? Or do you too sense the subtle pull of something ancient, something waiting to be molded?
Subscribe if you dare. Like or be swallowed by the darkness. Hurry before it's too late.